A paralyzed girl, a dying K9, one storm, and a miracle no one saw coming. This is the last mission of love you'll never forget. She was trained to sniff out bombs and chase criminals. But on one storm-heavy night, in a forgotten corner of rural America, a retired K9 named Luna faced the only mission that truly mattered saving, the only soul who had ever needed her without giving orders. A silent little girl named Ella. This is not a story of war or glory. This is a story of loyalty beyond duty, of love that asks for nothing in return, and of a bond that speaks louder than words. Stay until the very end, because buried in this quiet tale is a life lesson you'll never forget. The rain had no rhythm that night, just a ceaseless, slapping curtain of water falling in cold sheets across the dark woods. Lightning cracked somewhere far behind the tree line, illuminating the crooked branches for a single breath. Then, darkness swallowed them whole again. Somewhere beneath those trembling branches stood a German shepherd soaked, panting, shaking. Her name was Luna. Her fur, once the color of proud amber and sleek black, now clung to her lean body in dripping strands. She had no collar now, no badge, no uniformed handler issuing commands through a radio mic. All of that had been left behind miles ago, years ago. Tonight, Luna was alone. Almost. She lifted her head skyward and let out a low, trembling howl. It wasn't the kind of bark she'd been trained for in her years as a K9 officer. No sharp warning, no threat. This one was different. It was desperate, primal, and long. A sound ripped straight from the marrow of some ancient place that remembered what it was like to lose everything and still hope. At her paws lay a small figure. A child. The girl's skin was pale, bluish around the lips. Her clothes were soaked through, clinging to her tiny frame, like they feared the wind might tear her away. One arm was slung across Luna's neck, limp. The fingers still curled loosely into a patch of fur as though they'd tried to hold on right until the very end. But the end hadn't come. Not yet. Luna paced in a frantic half-circle, nudging the girl's cheek with her snout. No response. She lay still, too still, the way only children do when something is terribly wrong. Luna growled low in her throat knot out of anger, but fear and love. For all the training she'd received, the hours of simulated rescues, the explosions, the tracking drills, the crowd control, nothing had prepared her for this. She had been trained to follow orders, to subdue suspects, to protect officers. But no one had trained her to save a child in the middle of a storm, in a forest that smelled of pine and panic. And still, here she was. The wind picked up, rustling the leaves above them. Rain came harder, slapping the canopy until it gave way, sending cold rivulets onto the muddy floor. Luna whimpered and pawed at the child again, then turned her head and howled once more, louder this time, throat stretched until it cracked the air. No one answered. Somewhere in the far distance, a branch broke with a sound like bones snapping. But Luna didn't flinch. Her focus stayed locked on the small, fragile form beside her. Ella. Her name was Ella. Luna didn't know how to form that name into sound, but she knew it in her body, in the same way a heartbeat knows to keep going even after the world stops making sense. Luna had listened to that heartbeat every night as the little girl read her stories, as she stroked the fur between her ears, as she curled up beside her during thunderstorms when no one else could calm her. Not even her father, especially not her father. Tonight, Luna was the only one here, the only one who had followed Ella through the dark, who had run when she ran, who had stopped only when the girl stopped breathing so loudly. She sniffed the air quick, sharp. Her ears twitched. A flash of light crossed the sky again. The thunder that followed was slow, rumbling, almost hesitant. The storm wasn't finished, but it wasn't ready to let go either. Neither was Luna. With one last nudge, she pressed her nose into Ella's chest, waited, then stepped back. She circled once more, then threw her head back and barked short. Sharp. Again and again. Still, no reply. She turned to the shadows between the trees, to the trail they'd come down hours earlier. Her paws were caked in mud now. Her belly dragged, slightly lower. She was near the end of her pregnancy, and the effort to carry her own weight, let alone her fear, was monumental. But none of it mattered. She took a step toward the dog, then stopped, looked back. Ella. The girl still hadn't moved. Luna whimpered, stepped back to her, lay down beside her for just a second, her warm body pressed into the girl's side. Then she stood again, shook herself hard, and ran. She ran through thorny underbrush, her body swaying with the awkward rhythm of a body that wasn't made for this anymore. She stumbled over a fallen branch but caught herself. She ran faster, past ferns and wet moss, through the part of the woods where even the owls had gone quiet. Every few seconds, she paused, threw her head back and barked. Then she ran again. There was no plan. There was only one thought pulsing through her body like blood. Find help. Save Ella. Behind her, the rain kept falling. It blanketed the forest floor, filled every dip and trench, softened the soil around a child's unmoving feet. And for one brief second, just before Luna disappeared into the darkness, a small, invisible warmth flickered under Ella's ribs. A spark. A breath. Just barely. Then silence again. A howl echoed through the trees, carried by the wind. The screen faded to black. A single line appeared on screen. 5 days earlier. 5 days earlier. The fields around Samuel Carter's farmhouse stretched dull and lifeless beneath a hazy gray sky. Rows of corn stalks lay wilted, some bent over like they'd given up weeks ago. The barn door creaked with every breeze. Its hinges rusted like they'd grown tired of holding on. The only real sound was the soft shuffle of gravel beneath boots and the distant hum of unpaid silence. Samuel didn't talk much anymore. Not since the funeral. Not since the second notice from the bank. These days his words were short, flat, and mostly aimed at the ground. He had learned to keep his voice even, especially around Ella. But the weight in his chest didn't stay quiet. It was the kind that throbbed behind the ribs, deeper than breath. That morning, he stood outside the kennel behind the barn with a bucket of leftover rice and gravy. His hands were rough from work, but they trembled just slightly as he set the food down near the corner. Inside the kennel lay Luna, a retired German shepherd, thick with pregnancy now, her breathing shallow but steady. She didn't get up to eat. She just blinked slowly, watching Samuel like she understood too much and forgave too little. "She's not eating again," he muttered aloud, even though no one was there. Then, louder like it might change something, "You gotta eat, girl. Can't have you fading out on us." Still nothing. The dog simply shifted one paw forward, letting it fall against the straw with a soft sigh. Her body was bigger than it had been 2 weeks ago, her belly heavy and taut. Her coat, once so sleek and proud when she wore the K9 badge, had dulled. Her ears twitched at every bird call, but her posture remained still too still for what she used to be. She had been a service dog, a police hero. She'd sniffed out bombs, chased down suspects, even shielded her partner from gunfire once. The photos on Samuel's fridge still showed her proud and lean beside uniformed men. But here, now, she was just a dog with a swollen belly, lying in a pen behind a struggling farm. He took a breath, long and tired, and turned away. Inside the house, the bills waited on the kitchen table. 3 electricity notices stacked under a broken pen, a red-lettered envelope from the mortgage company. An empty checkbook lay beside a mug of cold black coffee. Samuel stared at them like they might blink and disappear. But they didn't. The phone sat near the sink. He picked it up, held it to his ear, before even dialing. "Yeah," he said into the line a few seconds later, voice low. "It's me. I got one you might be interested in." "Offer one." Pause. "She's older, yeah. Retired. Pregnant, too." A longer pause. "No, not sick. Just done, you know? Can't work. Eats more than she gives." He turned away from the window, away from the view of the barn. "I don't need much," he said quietly. "Just enough to get us through the week." He hung up before the man finished talking. His hand stayed on the phone for a long moment, then dropped to his side. Outside, the gravel crackled under fresh boots. Carl had arrived. Carl was the kind of neighbor who showed up too often with nothing to offer but opinions. His truck was loud, his attitude louder. He leaned against the fence like it owed him something and nodded toward the kennel. "You still feeding that useless mutt?" he asked, a smirk riding up his cheeks. Samuel didn't answer. Carl spat into the dirt. I mean, come on. You feeding her steak too? That thing's worth more on the scale than it is in that pen. Samuel turned to face him slowly. She's not meat, Carl snorted. She ain't a dog either. Not anymore. She's just a liability. Ain't nobody needs a hero dog once the uniform's gone. Samuel's fists clenched. You done? Carl shrugged. Just saying. I'd have traded her for feed weeks ago. Ain't no shame in it. That kind of sentiment's what gets people in trouble. Samuel didn't say a word. He just walked back to the house, leaving Carl's laughter behind him like the sound of a closing gate. Back at the kennel, Luna's ears perked. She had heard everything. The tone, the words. She didn't know their meaning exactly, but she knew what it felt like to be labeled too much. She had heard those same tones when they retired her. The pat on the head, the sigh, the soft talk behind the door when they thought she couldn't understand. But she had always understood. She rested her head on her front paws, eyes never leaving the farmhouse door. That night, when the moon rose behind the barn, a quiet shuffle reached the kennel gate, a soft click, a rustle of paper, then a gentle knock. A small figure stood there, hidden by the dark, holding a cloth bundle wrapped tight with twine. It was Ruth. The elderly neighbor's hands moved with careful rhythm as she slid the cloth bag through the bottom rail of the gate. Inside were Bones' real ones, not packaged treats, but the kind that told a dog someone still cared enough to save them. Don't let them fool you, Ruth whispered, crouching low. You're still needed, old girl. You hear me? Don't you give up. Luna didn't bark. She didn't move, but her tail thumped once-twice against the straw. And in the dim light, her eyes softened just a little. Samuel never saw Ruth leave the Bones. He wouldn't have said anything if he did. But in the morning when he passed the kennel again, the food he'd left untouched the day before was gone. All of it. And Luna was sitting upright now watching the farmhouse, waiting. The world hadn't welcomed her back, but someone had. And for the first time in days, her breath sounded just a bit stronger. Ella didn't speak much. Not because she didn't know how, but because words never seemed to land right. They scattered in her mind like autumn leaves in wind, and by the time she reached for them, they were gone. At school, the kids said she was weird. Some said she was slow. A few just stared. Teachers tried their best, but even their best came with sighs and polite smiles Ella could see right through. So, after a while, she just stopped going. Instead, she stayed home, in a house that creaked too much and talked too little. Her father, Samuel, was a man of soil and silence. Since her mother's passing, he'd buried himself in the land, and whatever remained of his laughter got buried with her. Ella built her own world in the quiet. And at the center of that world was Luna. The old German shepherd had arrived weeks earlier. Ella hadn't known what retired canine meant, but she knew the dog moved with a tired kind of grace, like a soldier who remembered running fast but no longer had the legs for it. Luna didn't bark much, didn't whine. She simply was, always watching, always listening, and somehow always near, Ella noticed. On the third day, she brought out her mother's old keyboard dusty, out of tune, keys stiff. She played one broken melody over and over until the notes stopped fighting back. Luna sat beside her, tail tapping once in rhythm. By the fifth day, Ella whispered stories, half real, half imagined. Tales of queens in barns and dragons under cornfields. She didn't need anyone to answer. Luna's warm body beside her was enough. And on the seventh day, Luna rested her chin on Ella's thigh as the little girl read Charlotte's Web aloud, slowly, stumbling on longer words but refusing to skip them. Her voice was barely more than a breath, but it was steady. She read every line. She read that whole chapter to that dog, Ruth muttered from her kitchen window, shaking her head with a smile. Talks more to that mutt than she said to another person all year. From across the fence, Ruth watched them two souls sharing silence like it was a secret language. No pressure, no questions, no expectations. Just the quiet rhythm of breath and fur, and a bond that didn't need translation. In the evenings, Ella would wrap Luna's belly with an old baby blanket she'd found in the attic, whispering softly, "For your babies. Keep them warm." Luna would stretch out in the hay, paws twitching as if chasing dreams she no longer believed in. At night, Ella drew them both. Pages and pages of pencil sketches, some crude, some startlingly detailed. Luna with wings, Ella in armor. The two of them standing on top of the world, just the way it felt when they were together. But on one cold Tuesday night, everything shifted. Ella had gone downstairs to get a glass of water. She tiptoed, careful not to wake her father. The house was always darker after 8, like it didn't want to be seen. As she passed the kitchen, she heard his voice low, gravelly, barely audible through the thin wall. "Look, she's not worth much now," he said into the phone, pacing slowly. "She's pregnant. Barely moves. Eats like a horse. E la frozze." "No, I'm not looking for top dollar," Samuel continued. "Just enough to get us through this month. You can pick her up Friday night, after the rain. A pause. Cash only." Ella's fingers tightened around the glass until it nearly cracked. The hum of the fridge, the ticking of the clock, all of it went silent beneath the pounding in her chest. He was selling Luna. She turned and bolted back upstairs, the glass still in her hand. In her room, she collapsed onto the blanket where Luna lay half asleep. The dog lifted her head, blinked once, then leaned forward, nuzzling Ella's cheek. And that was enough. Ella wrapped both arms around Luna's thick neck and buried her face in the fur. Her shoulders shook. No sobs, no sound. Just quiet trembles and hot tears that soaked into fur that had once stopped bullets. Luna didn't move. She stayed still, warm, present, steady. When morning came, Ella didn't speak at breakfast. Samuel barely noticed. He was reading the notice about the final utility warning. He mumbled something about rain coming, and that was it. By noon, Elia had made her decision. In her small backpack, she packed a flashlight, 2 granola bars, her drawing of Luna and the puppies, and the faded baby blanket. She wrapped half a loaf of bread in paper towels and tucked it inside. Then, before sunset, while Samuel was busy counting jars of preserved peaches in the cellar, she slipped on her boots, zipped up her coat, and walked out the back door toward the kennel. Luna saw her coming and stood up slowly. Ella knelt down, unlatched the gate, and opened the backpack. "We're not staying," she whispered. "Not tonight." Luna stepped forward and licked her chin, the way she always did when Ella got overwhelmed. The flashlight clicked on. The barn door creaked open. The fields waited in stillness. And together, the girl and the dog disappeared into the trees. The storm rolled in like an old memory, slow at first, then suddenly everywhere. Trees bent under wind gusts that howled through the cornfields. The barn doors slammed back and forth, hinges moaning. By the time the first drops of rain fell, Ella and Luna were already halfway across the back field, moving steadily into the thicket that led to the woods. Ella's hood was up, her boots already soaked. In one hand, she held the flashlight. In the other, she gripped the loop of twine tied to Luna's makeshift collar-an old scarf, knotted gently around the dog's neck. The ground was soft beneath their feet, each step sinking slightly into the mud. But Ella didn't slow down. She had memorized a path during her Daydream San old service trail that led through the forest to a cluster of abandoned hunting cabins. Her plan was simple. Get far enough away that no one would find them until it was too late, until Luna was safe. But plans made in silence don't always survive the storm. Thunder cracked open the sky. The flashlight flickered once twice, then blinked out. Ella stopped. The darkness around her was instant and total. Luna barked once, short and alert, then moved in close. The dog nudged her forward with a steady presence, pressing her side against Ella's knee. "I'm okay," Ella whispered, though her hands were already trembling. They moved again. But the forest, once a place of imagined castles and talking trees, had changed its shape in the dark. Branches grabbed at her coat like hands. Roots rose underfoot. The rain turned into cold needles against her cheeks. Then it happened. Ella stepped onto what looked like solid ground, but it gave way beneath her like loose gravel. Her foot slid, her arms flailed. The world tilted. She tumbled down the slope, crashing through brush and wet leaves, until the sharp edge of a stone caught the back of her head. The sound was a sickening thud, followed by nothing at all. Silence. The flashlight lay somewhere upstream. The backpack was gone. Ella's body rested in a narrow stream, half submerged. The water, though shallow, was bitter cold, wrapping around her limbs like ice fingers. Her face turned to the side, hair plastered to her cheek. Her breath came slow, uneven, and then still. Luna barked sharply, paws skidding down the slope. She reached Ella in seconds, nosed under her arm, sniffed her face. She licked at her nose, then her mouth. No response. Her tail dropped. She whined low, then tried to tug at Ella's sleeve with her teeth. Nothing. The stream gurgled, like it didn't notice. Luna circled once, confused, panting. Then she planted her front paws, leaned her weight into Ella's shoulder, and tried again, pulling, pushing, anything. Still, the girl didn't move. Luna let out a sharp, painful bark. It echoed through the trees, but bounced off wet trunks like it didn't belong. Her body trembled. Her belly ached with the weight of unborn pups. But there was no time to rest. No time to think. Just move. She turned away from the stream and ran. Her legs sank into mud. Her paws slipped over leaves, but she kept going through dense underbrush, over fallen logs, along barely their animal trails. The rain blurred her vision, but her instincts led her home. Back at the farmhouse, Samuel Carter stirred in his sleep. The storm rattled his windows and pushed its voice through the cracks in the wall. He rolled over, groaned, and sat up. Something felt off, like a thread had been pulled somewhere inside him. Then he heard it. One bark, far off. Then another closer. He frowned, moved to the porch, opened the door. There, coming through the field like a shadow half lit by lightning, was Luna. Her entire body was soaked, legs caked in mud, sides heaving. She stumbled, collapsed near the porch steps, then forced herself back up. Samuel stared, heart racing. What the hell? Luna barked again, louder this time, straight at him. Her eyes locked with his, wild and urgent. She turned, limped 3 steps back toward the dark woods, then looked back. Samuel didn't move. Luna barked again, short, demanding. Something in him shifted. He grabbed his coat. The rain hit harder as he stepped into the field. Luna moved slowly, leading him, stopping every 10 paces to look back, to make sure he was still there. He followed, over the fence, through the thicket, across the creek bed, his boots filled with water. His breath came in ragged bursts. The flashlight he carried barely cut through the storm. But still, he followed, until he saw her, Ella, lying still in the stream, skin pale, lips blue. He dropped the flashlight. Godella. He crashed through the water, lifted her out, clutched her to his chest. Her head lolled to the side, but there was a faint flutter in her breath, just enough. He turned, cradling her tightly. Behind him, Luna stood in the rain, watching. She didn't whine. She didn't move. She had done her part. Samuel didn't remember the run home. His boots had been soaked through. His breath tore in and out of his chest like broken bellows. Ella's limp body pressed against his chest, her cheek against his collarbone, colder than anything he'd ever touched. He kicked the farmhouse door open with his knee. The old hinges screeched like they were protesting. Inside, the lights flickered. The generator had started sputtering again. He hadn't had time to check it. He didn't care. He laid her gently on the living room rug, grabbed blankets from the couch, wrapped them around her shivering frame. Her lips were still blue, but her chest moved uneven, shallow but it moved. He crouched there, both hands trembling as he brushed wet hair from her forehead. Come on, baby girl. You hang on. You hang on for me. There was no answer, but she flinched slightly when he pressed the warm compress against her cheek. He took that tiny flicker like a thunderclap of hope. Luna entered through the same door, slow and soaked. Her paws tracked mud across the wooden floor. She paused a few feet from Ella, watching. Her ears were tilted back, not in fear, but in focus. Samuel looked up at her. For a moment, Neither moved. He nodded once. "Thank you," he said, voice hoarse, barely more than a breath. "You found her." Luna blinked slowly. Then, with surprising calmness, she turned and padded toward the back of the house, toward the barn. Samuel stayed with Ella for another 20 minutes. He built a fire in the hearth, rubbed her hands between his palms, and whispered the kind of apologies only a father can understand. They weren't full sentences, just fragments. "I should have listened. You didn't deserve this. I'm sorry. I'm so damn sorry." Ella stirred faintly under the weight of the blankets. Her skin was warming up. Her breathing deepened. It wasn't over. But the worst had passed. A strange sound caught Samuel's ear, soft, muffled, and distant, almost like short breaths or little squeaks. At first he thought it was just the wind in the chimney, but it came again, closer this time. He stood, leaving Ella wrapped and resting, and followed the sound out the back door. The rain had calmed to a gentle drizzle, almost apologetic, after the rage it unleashed earlier. He moved quietly toward the barn, lantern in hand, boots squishing into the softened earth. The kennel door was wide open. Inside, Luna was lying on her side, her body heaving in slow, deliberate rhythm. Her eyes were closed. Her tail beat the straw in brief taps, but otherwise she didn't move. Around hair, movement, tiny movement. Puppies, 4 of them, still slick, their little bodies wiggling blindly toward her belly, seeking warmth and milk with a sense older than thought. Their paws were no bigger than bottle caps. One let out a high-pitched cry, and Luna turned her head toward it, then gently nudged it closer. Samuel froze at the entrance, one hand on the frame. She had come home to give birth. He blinked hard against the moisture that wasn't from the rain. His throat tightened. This dog, this old, tired, useless dog had saved his daughter, and then, without rest or complaint, returned to do what no one had asked her to do, to finish what nature had started, to live her duty fully, even if no badge was pinned to her chest. She was a protector still. No uniform, no leash, but everything that mattered. He stepped forward, careful not to startle her. Luna looked up, meeting his gaze. Not proud, not afraid, just present. He knelt down beside her. The barn was warm from the heat of her body, from the straw, from something unseen that seemed to rise in the air like steam from earth after the first spring thaw. "I didn't know," Samuel said quietly. "I didn't know you still had that kind of fight in you." Luna laid her head down. "I didn't see it," he continued, his voice breaking. "You were trying to tell me, weren't you?" One of the pups let out a sneeze. Another managed to squirm onto Luna's back leg and promptly slid off again, mewling. And then, from behind him, a sound. Tiny footsteps. Ella. She stood in the doorway of the barn, wrapped in the blanket from the living room, face pale but awake. Her eyes locked onto Luna and the pups. Her lips parted but didn't speak. She didn't need to. Samuel stood quickly, about to usher her back inside, but she raised a hand. She stepped forward. Her legs were wobbly, but her determination was solid. Slowly, carefully, she lowered herself beside Luna and the puppies. She reached out a hand, hesitating only for a second, then placed it gently on Luna's paw. The old dog shifted slightly, pressing into the touch. And then, something happened. One of the puppies, barely the size of a potato, crawled away from the others, blindly, awkwardly, until it bumped into Ella's leg. It paused. Ella looked down, frozen. Luna lifted her head and reached forward, licking the pup once, slowly, almost ceremonially. And at that moment, Ella smiled. It was the kind of smile that grows slowly, like the sun lifting over a frost-covered hill. Samuel stepped back, not wanting to interrupt. His heart felt too big for his chest. He lowered himself onto a bale of hay, one hand pressing to his mouth, the other to his knee, grounding himself. The barn was quiet again, except for the soft rustle of straw, the new sounds of life. Ella leaned down, cradling the tiny pup against her chest. The baby squeaked in protest, then settled. Luna watched, her breathing even, her job, this new mission, just beginning. Samuel swallowed hard. He moved forward on unsteady legs and knelt beside Luna. Gently, he rested a rough, calloused hand on her head. She didn't flinch. Her eyes met his. And in that look, he saw everything she'd done. Everything she had always been. He ran his hand slowly down the back of her ears. And for the first time in years, his voice cracked not from anger, not from exhaustion, but from something deeper. "I was wrong," he whispered. "I was so wrong. The morning light crept into the barn through the old slats in the wall, golden and warm, softening the edges of everything it touched. The storm had passed, leaving behind a smell of clean hay and wet wood. Steam curled from puddles as the sun kissed the earth. The farmhouse for once was still. Inside, Luna lay curled in her straw bed, head resting gently across her front paws, body curled protectively around her newborns. The pups squirmed in a tiny, jumbled pile of fur, tails flicking and noses twitching as they nursed. Ella was right there with them, sitting cross-legged beside the kennel, a worn baby blanket across her lap. Her hand gently stroked Luna's side. She hadn't left Luna's side all night. Samuel watched from a few feet away, standing near the barn door, with arms folded and jaw clenched not out of frustration but emotion. His eyes followed the slow rhythm of Luna's breathing, the soft way she'd press her nose against Ella's leg every now and then. That dog, that damn dog, had done what no one else could. She had brought Ella back. And not just from the stream, from somewhere deeper. He was still standing there, silent in his thoughts, when a rumbling truck engine broke the calm. The sound grew louder, tires crunching over gravel. Samuel's face darkened. The buyer. He stepped outside and saw the silver pickup pulling into the front drive, the same one he'd spoken to on the phone before the world turned upside down. The man inside cut the engine, climbed out, and adjusted his ball cap. "Morning," the man called, wiping his hands on his jeans. Samuel stepped forward. "Yeah, about that call. I brought the carrier like you asked," the man continued, walking toward the back of his truck. "Figured she might not go willingly, being older and all. But we got ways." Samuel cut him off with a raised hand. "You won't be needing it." The man blinked. "What's that?" Samuel stood taller now, his boots planted firm on the wet gravel. "Luna's not going anywhere." "But I thought—" "I changed my mind," Samuel said, voice steady. "She saved my daughter's life, and mine in a way. I'm not selling her." The man's brow furrowed. "Look, buddy, I drove all the way out here. I brought cash. You said—" "I know what I said," Samuel interrupted. "But she's not for sale." The man stared at him a moment longer, then shrugged and turned back toward his truck. "Your loss." As the truck disappeared down the road, Carl's voice drifted from the side fence. He'd been leaning there, watching, arms crossed like he was waiting to pounce. "You serious?" he said, shaking his head. "You're keeping that mutt?" Samuel turned slowly. "Her name is Luna." Carl rolled his eyes. Yeah, the dog's a hero. Big moment. But what now? You gonna keep feeding her and those pups when winter hits? You think hay and tears are gonna pay the feed store?" Samuel exhaled through his nose. "You know what? Let her be a mother one last time. She's earned that." Carl snorted. "One last time? What? You starting a kennel now?" Samuel stepped closer, voice low but calm. "You don't get to talk about what's earned. Not today." Carl opened his mouth to snap back, but for once, nothing came out. He raised his hands in mock surrender and walked off, muttering to himself. "Whatever, man. Just don't come asking for help when you've got 10 dogs chewing through your siding." Back in the barn, the mood was softer. Ruth had arrived, not long after sunrise, wearing her usual knit shawl and carrying a thermos of sweet black tea. She sat on a crate beside Ella, pouring 2 small cups and placing them carefully on the hay between them. Ella didn't say anything at first, but she scooted slightly closer. They sat in silence for a long while, watching the puppies. The smallest Onier black and tan fluff ball with one white paw had managed to grab hold of a wooden spoon Ella had dropped earlier. It tottered clumsily through the straw, dragging it like a sword, bumping into everything in its path. Ruth chuckled. Ella jiggled softly. The sound was light and pure, like it hadn't been heard in years. Then came the moment. Ella turned toward Ruth, her voice soft but clear. "I want to keep this one." Ruth blinked, surprised. "You do?" Ella nodded, eyes locked on the pup still gnawing the spoon. "She's mine." "She?" Ruth asked, smiling. Ella nodded again. "Her name is Dot, because of her paw." Ruth patted Ella's shoulder. "Well then, Miss Dot, it is." A pause. Then Ella added, barely above a whisper, "And Luna too. I want to keep her. She's ours." Samuel stood just outside the barn door, listening. His eyes glistened as he turned and looked up at the open sky. The clouds had cleared. The light had changed. Something old and cold in him had started to melt. He wasn't a man who used big words or said things twice. But that morning, for the first time in what felt like forever, he smiled. And inside the barn, with the smell of hay and pups and warm tea hanging in the air, laughter rose again, real. Full laughter as Dot tripped over her spoon and tumbled headfirst into her mother's side. Luna lifted her head, gave the pup a single, loving lick, then lowered her eyes, content. Spring came slowly that year, the kind of spring that didn't explode with color, but crept in gently on budding tree, one softened breeze at a time. The fields around the Carter farmhouse no longer looked like barren scars in the land. They looked like possibilities, like beginnings. And inside the house, beginnings were blooming too. Ella was speaking again, not all at once, not in full conversations, but more each day. A word here, a full sentence there, enough to surprise her father when she started asking questions about clouds or puppies or which plant in the garden grew tomatoes. She even asked about school. Samuel had hesitated, but Ruth had stepped in, calm and steady as ever, and recommended a special program in town, a place where kids like Ella Bright, different, beautiful in their own rhythm, could learn without being forced to fit into boxes too small for them. So every Tuesday and Thursday, Samuel drove Ella to the center in his old pickup, and she walked through those wide glass doors with her backpack, a small stuffed puppy inside, and a real one waiting back home. Progress came quietly. Ella joined group play. She shared paints and crayons. She raised her hand once during story circle, and every adult in the room held their breath like witnessing a miracle. At home, Luna was still recovering. Her hips had stiffened, and she moved slower than before. But there was something peaceful in her now, like her heart had finished its last battle and could finally rest. Of her 4 puppies, 3 found loving homes nearby, but the one Ella named Dot stayed. Dot, with her one white paw and her impossible energy, had grown fast. She followed Ella everywhere, through the barn, across the fields, into the kitchen, even trying to climb into the bathtub once. She was too young to be trained yet, but she had that look in her eyes. The same look Luna had when she sat perfectly still, listening, understanding, without being told. Samuel noticed it first. "She's got something in her," he told Ruth one afternoon. Same kind of quiet knowing. So they reached out to the old K9 unit Luna had served with. And within a few weeks, Dot was accepted into a basic training program for therapy dogs. Unlike combat or patrol, this was gentler work, visiting nursing homes, sitting with war veterans during treatments, offering comfort with nothing but a warm body and a steady gaze. And Dot, to everyone's amazement, thrived. Her first day at the senior center, she curled up next to an 89-year-old man who hadn't spoken in days. Within 15 minutes, he was telling her all about the baseball team he coached in 1962. The staff sent Samuel a photo of Dot, sitting proudly in the man's lap, head tilted like she understood every word. Samuel showed Ella that picture at dinner. She didn't say anything at first, just stared. Then she reached out and traced Dot's ear on the photo with her fingertip. "She's just like Luna," she whispered. Samuel nodded. 2 days later, an envelope arrived in the mailbox. No return address, just the words, State Police K9 Division, printed neatly in the top left corner. Samuel opened it at the kitchen table. Inside was a letter typed, Formaland, something else, a small velvet box. Ella watched as he lifted the lid. Inside was a polished gold badge, tiny but heavy, engraved with Luna's old call sign, K9 to 214. Around the edge, a message had been added in neat cursive, in honor of her final mission service beyond duty. The letter explained everything. They had heard about Luna's action show. She had tracked Ella through the storm, saved her life, then delivered her puppies hours later without hesitation. It was unprecedented, quiet, heroic. And while Luna was no longer an active officer, her service had not gone unnoticed. They were awarding her the department's last badge of honor distinction, given only in the rarest of cases. Samuel didn't cry when he read it, but his hands trembled. And when he read it aloud to Ella, she did something he hadn't seen in years. She stood up, walked to Luna, who lay sunbathing on the porch, and pinned the badge to the red collar around her neck. "You're my hero," Ella said. Luna gave her a soft woof, tail wagging once before, resting her head again. That evening, the family sat together in the backyard. Ruth brought lemonade. Carly's. Even Carl showed up with a wooden crate full of dog biscuits and muttered something about paying his respects. They all laughed when Dot stole one right from his pocket. The sun dipped behind the trees, and the sky turned the color of faded denim. The barn lights came on one by one, casting soft halos over the yard. Ella sat cross-legged beside Luna, drawing quietly. She was working on a picture, Luna in a cape, Dot beside her, and Ella holding their leashes. In the background, the barn had wings. Ruth leaned over to Samuel. "She's doing good, isn't she?" Samuel nodded. "They both are." Silence settled between them. The kind that felt earned. The kind that held everything words couldn't add. As the stars blinked on above them, Samuel leaned back in his chair, the badge still in his hand, and thought about what Luna had done. Not just the rescue, but everything. She had brought Ella back. She had softened a father hardened by grief. She had given birth, given hope, and then given way, letting her pup continue where she left off. No commands, no handler, no mission briefing. Just love, pure and unshakable. As Dot chased fireflies around the garden and Ella laughed, Luna closed her eyes. Her work was done. She didn't save the world. She saved one child. And to that child she was the whole world. As the sun set over the fields and Luna rested beside the girl she had saved, one truth became clear. You don't need to change the world to be someone's world. Like Maya Angelou once said, "People will forget what you said. People will forget what you did, but they will never forget how you made them feel." This video carries a deeply human lesson we hope will stay with you long after it ends. If this story moved you, please subscribe to Veil Marks, leave a comment, and help us reach 1,000 subscribers. That would mean the world and inspire us to keep telling stories that matter. What did Luna teach you about love and sacrifice? Share with us below.